Okay, so no one has a crystal ball, but you spend
Yeah.
more time, at least with your nose up against that glass than most of us. So give me your thoughts, and let me just ask you for a couple of predictions.
Yeah.
Outcome of the midterms vis-a-vis increased Republican control of the House and a likelihood of Republican takeover of the Senate.
I think, based on everybody I've been talking to, the Senate looks very strong for the Republicans. I don't know that there is an obvious wave in this election other than fatigue about Obama and disdain for government generally, a lot of anti-incumbency. We've seen this, and this time of a presidency breeds that, certainly. So I think that bodes well for Republicans. There are some areas that give the party a lot of trouble. Pat Roberts in Kansas being one, which is a bit difficult, but still a sense that they can pull this out. So the smart money is still on Republicans taking control of Congress. Now here's the downside for them. In 2 years, in 2016, it then becomes a very difficult year for the Republicans because of some states that they're going to have to defend that are not solid red states, and they expect to do well now and do poorly in 2016. So it could be short-lived.
Okay, so you mentioned the president and his tanking popularity in all the polls.
Yeah.
Can he get his mojo back in his last couple of years?
Well, I think there's a chance. I mean, two things are going to happen. If the Republicans take control over the next couple of years, they're going to want to make a down payment, I think, on setting up a Republican nominee with some accomplishment. They're going to own a piece of government, and I think there'll be less and less patience with them just being opposition and just saying no to President Obama. I mean, the perverse thing about our politics here is not just politicians appealing to the lowest common denominator, which is happening all over the country, but it is a system that's set up through gerrymandering and through secret money and so forth that rewards intransigence. I've talked to politicians who are rewarded for going home and saying, you know what, I said no to almost everything in Washington, because while we've got big problems, if they get their way, they're going to destroy the country. So I just voted no. I just stood in the way. So compromise, practical politics, there's not as much of a reward for that, which is why so little gets done. So I think if they control something, they're going to have greater pressure on them to accomplish something with the president. I think the president is going to be, he's got very little political capital left. Political campaigns are accelerated like never before. And he has got a huge problem on his hands in the rest of the world and what America is going to do to try to defeat ISIS and how it's going to project power when it really doesn't want to and when the politics are so bad around it.
And I know that the midterms will have an impact on what happens in 16, but if you're handicapping as we sit here today, who are the two nominees going to be, and who is likely to be our next president?
Look, Hillary Clinton obviously is formidable. I mean, I think she could face some heat on the left for a couple of reasons. One, she's more hawkish than the party is. Two, she is not going to be seen as the future. I mean, yes, to be the first woman president is groundbreaking, is history. That's the big trump card in terms of being a down payment on the future. But the vision and the agenda is not going to be dramatically different than President Obama. And I think the country is ready for change. I think the question is always, I think, how the voters want to correct for what we've had. What do they want that's different? I think they're going to want somebody who's less nuanced, more resolute. And I think she may ultimately be that. So she's going to be very strong. She'll face some heat on the left. She'll be very strong. I think the Republicans still have to make a decision between kind of the big tent Republicanism and movement conservatism. So a lot of money still on Jeb Bush. If he wants to get in, he's appeared reluctant. Chris Christie, I still think, is formidable despite the problems he's had. And then you're going to have some of the governors, some of the more movement conservatives. Rand Paul is somebody I think to keep an eye on. So I think you're going to have, say, Paul Ryan, Jeb Bush, Chris Christie doing battle with a Rand Paul, maybe a Scott Walker, more of the movement conservatives, and they're going to have to fight that out and figure out the more pragmatic, the one who's got more, broader appeal is the one who will be more difficult for Hillary Clinton to face.
You don't see a third attempt for Romney?
I don't. I think he's popular. I think that's because of some buyer's remorse that Republicans are feeling and others may be feeling. And so they want him to campaign. Remember, he's got a lot of, he's tapped into a lot of money in the party, and he's got high name recognition, and he's got that benefit of saying, see, if you just listen to me, and that has some resonance right now. But I think he recognized that he always faced a problem as a candidate, that he didn't have the trust of movement conservatives, that forced him in a position to be too compromised as a candidate, which was a shame, because I thought he brought a lot of really positive qualities as a leader to the table. But as a movement conservatives, he was more compromised, and I think that became a huge problem for him.
Do you see Biden or any of the other leading Democrats challenging Hillary if she runs?
I just think, again, I think the problem for Biden is going to be raising money. Obviously, I mean, it's striking that a sitting vice president wouldn't be more of an automatic, and he is by that position. But again, that is not a vote for the future. I remember being with President Bush, and this was toward the end of his term, and he said, he was a big, not a supporter, I don't want to say that, but he was very impressed with Hillary Clinton. He always thought that she would be president. And he said at the time, the problem for McCain was that the country is not going to go back. The country just doesn't go back. And that's one of the tests, I think, in this campaign, because if the country votes for Hillary Clinton, are you going forward or are you going back? You're going forward with the first woman president, but you're going back with the Clinton era. I mean, it's a very interesting dynamic.
That would be the same problem for Jeb Bush.
That would be the same. I mean, and it is, honestly. I mean, really, it's going to be 2016 and we could have a Clinton-Bush ticket. I mean, it just seems like, can't our political class do better than that? And by the way, that's something that I thought Barbara Bush was saying. If you remember when she came out and said, no, my son's not going to run. But I thought she made a great point, which is, of course she loves her son and thinks he would be terrific, but she's seen her husband and her son get vilified in that role. I don't blame her for saying, I don't want my other son to do that. So we'll see. But again, I think the problem for Biden is going to be fundraising and just kind of the standing in the party.
And you may not remember this, but we're in the state of Illinois right now.
Yeah.
You're moving around the country talking a lot of places, so let's talk a little local politics about which you don't spend as much time
Right.
as the rest of us who are trapped in this vortex. But anyway, but you've paid attention to enough races around
Yeah.
the country, watched Rahm and others for enough years. You don't see a threat to Durbin in that race against Mr. Oberweis for the Senate.
I don't. I mean, some people I've talked to suggest that he could have more problems than he might otherwise have in an anti-incumbent kind of year. But the problem that I've talked to local Democrats about is a turnout issue, which I think is also a national issue for Democrats, which is how are they going to get their base out? And that becomes really important in an off-year election. It's something that you've heard the president talk about, which is that the Democrats have to be fired up in an off year when he's not on the ballot. And of course, he had great organizing power in his campaign to get young people and minorities and women out, and that's going to be a real challenge. So, all the things that you detailed in your remarks about fiscal stewardship and say nothing about corruption become a huge opportunity for the Republicans in this state. So I think that's why turnout's going to be important. If it weren't for Quinn's unpopularity, that it otherwise shouldn't be a problem. But that, coupled with some of the concerns about turnout, I think make this a tougher, tighter contest.